All right, guys, welcome back to the Phenomenal Student Podcast. I hadn't done one in about a month or two, so I'm excited to interview Sean Morrisey. He didn't have much on the internet, so maybe I figure I help his algorithm out a little bit. So Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jeremiah.
All right, so let's get to it. So I always call this my Walking Dead question. How did you get your start in education?
So a little roundabout. So when I first started, I was a graduate student. I was going to get my PhD in school psychology, and and my wife was we were actually in the same program. So we both applied for the same program. And first year of graduate school, my wife got pregnant, and we kind of re looked at, do we want to go through another 6 years of school and move away from our family, because be like the path with a PhD in that is like you're going to become professors, do research in that. So we kind of think we decided to just get our masters and kind of stay local. So I worked as a school psychologist for 7 or 8 years. But I realized, I think most people who go into school psychology, it's more kind of the mental health aspect, of
Hmm.
things, and I really got into the instructional aspect. All the students that were being referred at the elementary level, I mean, 90% were reading concerns.
Hmm.
So, as a psychologist, I just started to read everything about reading. I remember, like, early on, Sally Shaywitz has a book, Overcoming Dyslexia.
Hmm.
Read that a couple times. The National Reading Panel came out, I think, in 2000. I read that from cover to cover a couple times. Um, so I just got really interested in the instructional and kind of in reading instruction, and realized probably about 4 or 5 years into my school psych career, I think I'd rather teach the kids than kind of consult with teachers about it. So I went back to school. My wife was a very good wife for a year. We had three small children under the age of 5, and I went back to school and worked full time, and got my teaching degree, and was fortunate enough to stay in my own district. And I kind of jumped right into first grade after that. So that's my that's the little background of where I started.
How long were you in first grade?
2 years. So I really wanted to teach the young ones. And then it's in our district. It's based on seniority. One of the sections was cut in my school because of enrollment, and I had to bid out and to bid it into a different grade level, whatever was open. And I was heartbroken. I did not want to leave first grade. But I mean, it was like it was a really tough time. And but I realized, after teaching fifth grade for a couple of years, I like fifth graders too. And
That's a big jump.
yeah, and then I just realized, after I was in fifth grade for like about 5, 6 years, I've been doing, like, you spend a lot of time, kind of creating stuff, getting things done, and I'm like, I think I'll stay here for a while. So I've been mostly in fifth grade. I did a year in fourth as well.
So let me ask you this question. As somebody that taught fifth grade a couple different years, first, how is it just teaching fifth graders? Because I know, I mean, sometimes male teachers, I think we may be not more equipped, but it's probably a little easier to deal with the attitudes of fifth grade. But how is it just teaching fifth graders? I think not just the academic piece, because I feel it's easier to teach them in fifth grade academically, but how is it dealing with just, I wouldn't call it behavior, but we know how fifth graders can be.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly think it's the one grade level that I think people should be trying to get to more often, because in our district, sixth grade starts middle school. So it's like, they're the oldest ones in my school. But I honestly love the age, because I still think most kids at that age want to please, at least, like, I've been in the same school for pretty much my whole career. They want to please. And most times, like, being a male teacher, for most kids, I'm the first male teacher they've had since,
A first boy teacher, have you ever heard that
yeah, first
before?
boy teacher. Yeah, yeah. So, I think fourth, fifth grade, I think it's a nice age. They're old enough, they still want to please. But it's fifth grade. Some of the kids, halfway through the year, they're ready for middle school. So, you kind of have that as well.
Yeah, so I get that. So it's kind of like I hear the boy teacher thing a lot. You know, you my first boy teacher. I'm like, grown man, but okay.
Right.
And then help. My last name is short, so the kids are always like, "Your last name is short, but you're tall." I'm like, I'm 5'11". I'm average height, y'all. I'm not that tall. But what was the major? I taught second grade one year, so I definitely understand that. What is the kind of like difference between teaching the littles as opposed to teaching the bigger kids?
Um, I I think there might be some more similarities and differences. I mean, I think honestly the difference you're getting into a lot more content. You know, you're getting into a lot more social and science content at definitely a much deeper level. Like, I mean, just like I just finished a unit on World War II and the Holocaust.
Hmm.
So, like, it's an introductory unit for fifth graders, but that's a pretty heavy topic, for
Hmm.
10-year-olds. So, I think some of the content you're definitely getting into more but there's a lot of parallels with kids in first grade. They're learning how to read, how to decode. I think in fifth grade sometimes we forget about it, but kids are still learning how to read and decode as well. They don't have the code down, and they still need to be explicitly taught that. um I think some similarities, like I've always been kind of big in vocabulary, and
Hmm.
just trying to scale up kids' vocabulary, no matter if it's first graders or fifth graders, teaching them bigger words. I think they feel like, I think that they get a lot of motivation by, ooh, I just learned those words and I know that most other fifth graders don't know that word.
Hmm.
And even some words they go home and their parents don't know it. So, I think those are some similarities for sure.
So how does like you were a school psychologist, and that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask anyway, but being a school psychologist kind of inform your teaching. Like I was a writer before, and I did media stuff. So like of course, and we're going to get into this part. I guess it's probably my next question after this, of the social media aspect and what kids are doing now when it comes to that. But how does your past as a school psychologist kind of inform your teaching?
Yeah, I think honestly I was lucky. I think I was when I started teaching, I think I had a lot more background than just, like, new teachers that just went through like their education program. I mean, I probably observed in, 200 classrooms
Mm-hmm.
before I ever, did one lesson of teaching. So as a psychologist, even though like, you're called in to observe students, you're seeing like what really works and what, from a kind of a behavioral standpoint and a learning standpoint, and what doesn't. So I think I was really fortunate in that, where, I knew going in kind of how I wanted to frame my classroom based on just, what so many excellent teachers were doing that I observed.
How did what was the look from your principal? You say you pretty much been at the same school. Like, how did your principal act when you told him that you were wanted to switch from being a school psychologist? Like, I've heard of some interesting switches in teaching, but never like from a school psychologist. Because most time people in those roles normally want to stay completely far away from that part of it. When you told him you wanted to become a regular teacher.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is different. I haven't found another person out there who went from a school psych to a teacher yet. So if you are, like, please email me. So it was a different principal at the time, but I think he respected me, and he knew like I really wanted to do that. So, but I had to go through the application process and everything. So, my actual first like lesson was on my observation. So, and I did a vocabulary lesson based on bringing words to life book. So I think it was like for my district with the change, I think it was supportive. And it was just good timing where there was an open first grade position, right after I got my teaching credentials. So, and kind of 18 years later, now I'm kind of the old man in the grade level now. I'm not the young guy. Yeah.
Do you find yourself, I mean, obviously as a school psych, you're the one coming and diagnosing whether kids have issues, things like that. Do you find yourself kind of like, I'm gonna say diagnosing your students, but do you kind of come with that lens still when
Yeah.
you're working with your kids?
100%. I think it's such a help. It's just with that background, like even just knowing like, what dyslexia is. Like I can tell, with kids coming into fifth grade without, and it might not be kids who ever been tested before, but based on all their work in the classroom, I have a good idea if
Hmm.
they have characteristics of, dyslexia, characteristics of like a developmental language disorder. You know, it definitely has helped in my teaching, and even the other behavioral things. Like when I was in graduate school, I worked for a few years in ADHD research, so I have a pretty decent background in that. So, you know, kids struggling with attention issues and things like that. And I'm not my attention isn't the strongest as well. So my background, I think, from a behavior management standpoint, has really helped. Yeah.
I always tell people if I get bored working on an assignment or working through a lesson or something like that, I know my kids will. So, like, and I'm a grown adult that struggles with it,
Yeah.
attention. So it's like, if I know if I'm struggling with it, I'm pretty sure I know how they're probably going to feel.
Yep.
Um, so let me ask you about the aspect of, because I mean, I tried to cover things that other people hadn't talked about. They tend to talk about the same stuff.
Hmm.
So, how you're still teaching now, 18 years later? Obviously, you have that master's background. Have you ever thought about going to whether it's becoming a coach or being something at more district level? Because obviously, your credentials kind of match up to that.
Yeah. Honestly, I think until I retire, I like the classroom too much.
Hmm.
You know, I wouldn't mind. You know, I think in the UK they have some systems where, you know, you could teach 4 days a week and then like a day a week you're doing coaching. Like in our country, they don't usually like it's either or you're you know, it's like full time. So I definitely want to stay in the classroom.
Hmm.
I honestly just recently though have started to do more professional development sessions, even with local school districts right around me on vocabulary, on fluency. So I'm kind of, you know, dipping my feet in that water. I do enjoy doing professional development. But I think my heart is still in the classroom, at least probably for at least the next 5 years or so. Yeah.
So I guess talking about those PDs, and I know what I've seen a lot of people talking to you about has been vocabulary and the background knowledge, and just looking a little bit at the reading reconsidered curriculum. It seems very kind of similar to CKLA, although CKLA has more, I think, text or passages sometimes.
Hmm.
But just tell me a little bit about the reading reconsidered, I guess, curriculum, and then kind of why you focus so much on. I mean, I focus a lot on vocabulary. Focus so much on vocabulary and background knowledge.
Yeah. So I think like you know, with the novel, so I have like a novel study portion of my day, and my district just went to bookworms this year. So, and I've been using Reading Reconsidered for years. Fortunately, some of those books they overlap. They're in kind of both curriculums.
Hmm.
Um, so I just think like with the novel study in the background, I love historical fiction. And you know, at the elementary, some like we're kind of time poor sometimes where you if you're reading and you're doing like ELA type stuff, you have to somehow incorporate social and science into it as well. Like there's no, you know what I mean? Like it's so like a lot of times my novel study, it it'd be hard to differentiate between like sort of and like is this an ELA lesson or is it a social studies lesson? It's kind of both. Certainly, and I think Daniel Willingham says it, the psychologist, you know, stories are like really powerful. And I love like having a historical fiction novel as part of teaching history. Like right now, we're I'm in the middle of Bud Not Buddy. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with that book?
Yes, I'm familiar with that
Yes.
book.
So, you know, the story, it's just an amazing story. But the just bringing the history, like we're at the one part in the book where Bud is like on the side of the road and the author keeps talking about he's in Owasso, Michigan at 2:30 in the morning. And then like the Reading Reconsidered program, like they do a nice job where, ooh, they have passages about cities in the past in the 1930s, like Owasso, Michigan, and they talk about sundown towns and you know, ooh, like you know, then you know, racism gets brought up,
That's a
and
little
it's just
heavy.
it is heavy, but like, you know, I think, you know, kids need to learn that. And I
Mhm.
mean, but it ties with the book. Like, you know, that author, there's a reason why that author kept repeating that. And, you know, the kids don't have any background knowledge of that, you know, so, you know, imparting more of that background knowledge with a really good story, you know, I think it works perfectly.
So I know a lot. I was some looking at some of the other podcasts. They talked about some of your results. How does that kind of tie in with state testing? I'm in Texas, so all we care about is stars. So I'm not familiar. I know most other states are Common Core and all those good things. So how does that tie in, like with y'all state testing and everything like that? The actual curriculum that you have.
Yeah, so like I mean in New York, I mean it's I don't we still have our state tests 3 through 8. In fifth grade, we have a science state test as well. I think, in years past, and still I think a lot of districts, we have to like a lot of times a ton of time and effort goes into trying to figure out this type of state test question, and we need to like go over this main idea over and over and over. And I kind of always been a contrarian in nature. Like I started out as a psychologist, now I'm an elementary teacher, I'm a male, like I'm not like so I don't sort of fit the mold. And I've never like done a lot of state test prep. Like I probably do less state test prep, probably less than probably 90% of teachers out there for sure. I only probably do a couple hours a year just getting them kind of the ready for the format. Um, I just try to teach like really good books, a lot of language, a lot of vocabulary. I try to build up their fluency. But like with the state testing, I've like especially recently, I've had really, really good results. And I'm not really teaching to the test.
And that's trust me, I actually like I know I was talking to someone yesterday and they were asking me, I'm like, look, I'm competitive. I like state tests, but there's still an aspect of kids need to be able to read. And one thing I found, I hadn't seen too many kids that actually could read fail the test. I'll say that much. It's very rare. I mean, sometimes you try to teach tricks or teach certain things, and
Yeah.
you can't even do that in Texas anymore because the way they design the test is kind of hard to do. If they can't read, they're probably not gonna pass because
I actually evaluated some of our state test data, and I was talking with a counselor. This was probably about a month ago, and I looked at a whole grade level, and I just separated kids' reading fluency, like how many words per minute they're reading, and their like overall vocabulary, like like a vocabulary measure. And all the kids who were fluent readers, like they were at the 50th percentile or more, so they're reading appropriately with fluency and had a decent amount of like language. They didn't have they weren't weak in their language skills. So I looked at like 150 kids. All those kids who had good fluency, good vocabulary, all but two were proficient on the state assessment. So, and then I just for kicks, I go to this, my background helped me here a little bit. I go to the counselor, I go, I bet you those two kids who were good with their fluency and good with vocabulary, I bet those are kids with executive functioning weaknesses. They probably are like kids with ADHD.
lazy.
Looked
I
at the
mean,
two kids, because
yeah.
because they're not paying attention as well. Or they're not like metacognitively, like are they, and she looked at those two kids who weren't, and she's like, you got it perfect. Like those two kids both had executive functioning
Yeah, I
issues.
got our space cadets, and then and that's the thing. There is, I mean, like I said, I am big on tests. I'm very competitive. I like that. I
Me
was in
too.
I was in the sports before I became a teacher, but it's still an aspect of hey, they still got to have actual skills.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes you're in planning and they might say, "Hey, they did this on the test, and we're gonna work on this skill." I'm like, one, this is reading, not math. That's a whole different thing. Two, that kid can't read. You can't. How am I gonna teach them analyzing text structure if they can't even read the text? Like, what difference does it make? We might need to focus on the reading part first, then we can get to all the big stuff. It isn't that they don't know text structure; they don't know what reading is. So it's kind of,
Right.
I think that's the aspect that kind of gets lost, and I guess it kind of transitions a little bit into um the whole SR thing. Because even with reading reconsider, I was looking like, well, it's focusing more on novel study, things like that. So with SR, even at times, I feel like I don't know if people have defined it enough what it actually is. Because sometimes people pigeonhole it into a phonics thing or
Yeah.
it's whatever they want to put it on. So how do you feel all that kind of mixes in? Well, you're talking about reading reconsider or kind of like your approach to teaching. Because of course, SOR, science of teaching reading, is kind of like the big thing now.
Yeah, I think, like I'm just thinking about my school day. Novel study is just one part of the school day.
Hmm.
So when you say you do CKLA, I actually use for science and social the core knowledge, science and social texts. I
Hmm.
those are my main text I
Oh, so you're
use.
self-contained in fifth grade?
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
there twice. It's not fun.
Yeah. Well, it's there's pros and cons, right? So like, planning wise, you're planning for everything. It's not easy, but you have those kids all day long.
Hmm.
We switch for math. We kind of set our kids for math, but for everything else, science, social, and ELA, I have the same kids. So, you can it's a little bit easier to plan out your school day, with that. But like, so the core knowledge, I use their science and social text. And I have another part of my day where I'm doing spelling work, vocabulary work, reading fluency work, morphology work, like in a 30-minute lesson as well. So, I think sometimes we get to third, fourth, and fifth grade, and the science of reading, we talk about the phonics and all of that in K through 2, but 3 through 5, there's not as much talk about it. And kids still need spelling work. Kids still need vocabulary work. Kids still need fluency work in those grade levels. Even into middle school, kids need that. So like that's honestly a big part of my day. And I think that part of my day, I think is really, really valuable for the kids.
And kind of going with what you were, I guess, backtracking a little bit, you're talking about vocabulary because even I kind of studied our state test and kind of like looked at some of the stems for the questions and different things like that. I'm like, this is a vocabulary and writing test. It's not a reading test because if you look at character traits or character relationships, or of course you need to know the academic vocabulary for particular questions or skills. But a lot of it, like, as you said, if they can read fluently and they have a strong language, they tend to pass because a lot of times kids will pick the wrong answer just because they don't know what it means.
Right.
And I always
So
tell them, like, if you don't know what the word means, there's a high chance it's probably the answer. But
well,
um,
in fifth grade, where I started kind of my like vocab, like my like kind of crazy like journey in this, it was based on a state test. It was like it was a little over 10 years ago, and our state, probably like Texas too, there would be probably a group of people that decide, oh, what type of question is this, main idea or that, and they kind of code it based on a standard. But we looked at the question, and we kind of knew when kids were kind of like talking after the test, like they didn't know what the word benefit meant. And in fifth grade, we just like, I think we do too much assumptions on language on what kids know. And it was just the word benefit. They didn't know what benefit meant. So they totally messed up the question. And it was just one word.
yeah, and it's
One
like
word.
I know a couple years ago, fifth grade. I know it was. I think was it the first? No, it's the second EC. We do extended constructive responses here. I don't know they do in other states what they call them, but you have
Yeah.
to read a reading text and then essentially write an essay. I do 4 paragraph structure. I have my own structure for that, but in the question or the prompt was explain how Kim showed determination in the story, and a lot of the kids didn't even know what determination meant. That was like, so how are they going to, one, they don't know what the word means, then they're going to have to find text evidence to support it. They don't know what determination mean. What evidence are they going to find? Like, it don't make sense. So
Right.
it's like one of those things. So it's kind of, I think people need to take that more into account. I mean, they have it on our state test where the kids can look it up, even on, because we do it through the computer. And I'm assuming most states are moving toward that. So they can look it up. But one, most kids, they're too lazy to do it sometimes. But at the same time, it's like those type of things. Do they not know the skill, or is it they just might not know what this one probably adult word means? Because even on one of our recent district tests, I teach fourth grade this year, and it asks how do we know that this person is flexible? Not the actual flexible, like, with your body and stuff like that. Flexible, like as a human. I'm like, there are a lot of adults that can't even answer that.
Right.
So I'm like, why would you put? Now it was a district test, not one of the state tests, but I'm like, why would a kid know what somebody being flexible is?
Yeah.
It's
I honestly think the language side of it it's the biggest piece than anything else. Because a lot of kids will like, even if they're fluent in first, second grade, I think the language side, when they're answering questions and things like that is not that complex. So, they're doing great. They hit fourth and fifth grade, and they don't have the background knowledge, they don't have the language, and that's where their
mm.
reading comprehension is suffering.
So I'm actually a true fifth grade teacher question, or really elementary. Of course, we got 6, 7 now. But how is it dealing with because I tell people like all these kids are second language learners because all of them talking slang. The funniest story I've told this a couple of times. I know I'm part of the reading league here, and one of the guys, he was kind of head of it for a while, but now we have an executive director. and we were talking. Like he's a 6-year-old white male, and he said that he was talking to his granddaughter, and she referred to him as bruh. I'm like, look, man, like we like it has to be like a come his granddaughter refer. It sounds just like this is doing too much. So, um, how's it now? Kind of like adjusting to how their languages. I mean, they always thought they were too cool for school at that age group, but shifting toward the social media aspect of kids having, I guess, their first language seems to be slang.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have it harder now as teachers with language compared to maybe 20 years ago. I mean, just look at all the kids who are like, toddlers and preschoolers. They're on iPads. Like I don't know the actual research, but they have to be on iPads way more than they were on technology way more than, kids were before. Sure, we had television and that, but we had Sesame Street and, a lot of it was educational. And not saying that things on the iPad aren't educational, but like, man, I don't know if there's as much language spoken, in the homes, even from like, from birth through age 5. You could even see like even parents dropping off kids, they're waiting in their cars and, a lot of them aren't talking, parents on phone, kids like in the back, on a device. So there's just less language. So I think, we have our work cut out for us because I think in general outside of the school, there's just less language, less talking happening. So there's going to be less knowledge in that in that.
Yeah, one of the things I try to push with my kids, I know one of the things that I guess I recently released, I'm talking about figurative language, and I like to mix in more colloquialism because that's really how they
Mhm.
talk. And like they still, even when they were trying to define the actual slang or colloquialism, they still were using another slang word. Yeah, like and I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, this might actually be the difficulty is that these kids don't know how to transfer from they're still using slang to define slang, which in a sense
yeah,
they may understand it. Like, oh, what does it mean to have swag? Oh, you're cool. I'm like, you're still using a slang word. It's like,
yeah,
so it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting just to kind of see that. I wouldn't say it wasn't like that early in my career, but I definitely see a little bit of a shift there when it comes to, like you said, their ability when it comes to language, and then their parents are using these terms, so it just makes it worse. So,
yeah, yeah.
so, um. So I wanted to kind of get into this part about now I'm starting to see your name pop up the last year or so. How's it now being able to be a teacher and then now you're doing interviews and things like that? How's it kind of making that shift toward being a bit more known?
Uh, I think like, I'm not a big social media guy except for I still call it Twitter, except for X. You know, I think, for me, I had more, all the professional development, I think, in most of my career until I started becoming active on X was like just like myself. It wasn't like talking to others in that. Maybe a few colleagues maybe a few colleagues at where I work. Um, but I think like the shift, I learned so much from other people that now I think like I'm still learning from others, but like, teachers, are DMing me, asking me for advice and things like that. So like I think, it feels good to be respected. They like because I not a lot of teachers will post the actual stuff that they're doing in their classroom because, the trolls out there will like, they'll make terrible comments and that. But like the discussions that we're having just with teachers, through social media are, I think, great discussions. Like even just like there are times where we just have a Zoom session. Like I met with a science teacher, a secondary science teacher. She wanted to know more about vocabulary. I wanted to know more about like, am I teaching science right? So I think it's just making me a better teacher and hopefully like, other people who kind of respect my vocabulary work, they're trying some things in their classroom as well.
Well, I know they say micro teaching is or macro teaching, whatever, is one of the highest effect sizes. Just watching yourself. Because even I'm like, because I always tell people now, it's like, man, some of the stuff y'all see me doing, I've been doing some of this stuff for years. I just finally decided to start with TikTok and things like that. Those platforms, you kind of can put yourself out there.
Yeah.
You never thought something like I'm literally some routines I've been doing for like 5, 6 years, like or since at least my second year for sure, second or third year. So it's just interesting. One, it's nice to like have people kind of appreciate your work. But I think I was talking to Laura Stam, and she was like your stuff is so raw. I'm like, it's just a regular classroom. Like I was talking with this lady yesterday. I was like, a lot of times we go to these trainings and you see these them, I guess, showing a teacher teaching. I'm like, what classroom is this? I'm like, the kids are super well behaved in the sense of like almost you got 20 people in the room. The kids are almost perfect. I'm like, where is the actual classroom when you got the kid? If you're teaching lower grade, like I literally remember I used to do small group. There was one kid I literally had to post in the corner to the left of me because if I didn't, he'd be bouncing around the room, just
Right,
disrupting everybody. Or I know the lady told me, "Oh, your videos, the kids so engaged." I'm like, they do stuff. It's
right,
it's what you call editing. I cut stuff out. So it's like my kids aren't perfect, trust me. So they do things you just probably don't notice what they're doing in the background. But so I'm just like, those are actual real classrooms. So I think that's what people want to know. Like, how can you manage these things while at the same time being engaging and doing high quality stuff? Because a lot of times I always say I can tell the difference between somebody like yourself that's a straight up teacher and then people that are researchers, because a lot of the stuff they'll tell people to do, I'm like, one, this takes too long, it's boring too.
yeah.
I'm like, where do you think like these kids are gonna, get this stuff? Like they're not. So it's kind of, some of the stuff is okay, but a lot of times I can tell that a person, I won't say never been in a classroom, but they don't truly understand what classroom teachers are really dealing with. So I guess I was talking a bit of soliloquy. But what do you kind of think about the current landscape? I mean, you've been teaching for a while, longer than me. So I kind of came in after a couple years of teaching. I saw the shift. So how is it teaching now in this current landscape where everything is kind of the pendulum, as they say, has shifted toward more the science of reading focused when it comes to teaching?
Yeah, I honestly, over the past, I think 25 years, I think we definitely are in a better place now.
Hmm.
Um, I think the knowledge about what has, and when we talk about research, it's like what has the best chance of working. Like, the teachers in the UK, like how they say, they're like, what's the best bet? Because like, everything's not perfect. Like classrooms are classrooms. The kids are different every year, but like, we should try to be doing in the most part like what has the best chance of working and for kids learning. So I think we are definitely in a better place than 20 years ago. I think in some regards though, like we're sort of in a worse place too because there's like so much testing and so much collecting data and we never stop to think like okay, like how can we assess kids in the quickest amount of time that's going to give us the most accurate information? Because
Right.
every time we're assessing kids or every time, this is happening, we are not teaching.
Hmm.
So like there's that kind of balance. But the landscape of, I think, especially early on, that like a structured phonics program is important for all students. I think that's vital because, 15 years ago, most school districts, it was up to the teachers didn't even really like teach, like the phonics was all over the place. So I think we're in a better spot there. I still don't think we're in a great spot with vocabulary.
Hmm.
I think, that, phonics gets so much like just so much airtime. I think like the language side is where, I hope we get to next, where like that we really start talking about that more.
What I've seen, and one of the things I just wrote about, probably gonna write more about, a lot of these curriculums, and I've seen a couple in the last 5 or 6 years was HMH, you're talking about CKLA. They typically just focus a lot on reading and the vocabulary or even the editing, revising, those type of things. Typically are just activities. It's not a
Yeah.
structured approach. And like you said, teaching vocabulary, that's kind of the main thing. The skills, I think, kind of just flow if
Hmm.
they actually got the words to actually like assess the actual reading curriculum and different things like that. But there isn't, I don't think I've ever seen, as you said, like a structured, explicit way. I mean, I do it myself, but where it's like built into the curriculum to actually teach vocabulary. Typically, it's like teach reading for 90 minutes and, figure out the rest, and it's kind of like, this is really the best. Because I know I hate to talk about when I was a kid, because my student even joked, she was talking about something and said, like, oh, I thought you were gonna say in 1989. I'm like, look, I'm not that old. But at the same because my kids always talk about how I'm giving speeches and stuff. But at the same time, like I don't remember reading being a big part of the block. I don't remember like, oh, we'll be doing reading for blah blah blah. It's normally was like did social studies for this long, you did science for this long, this for this long, but it wasn't like, oh, we gotta teach reading the whole time. So it wasn't a big focus on that. So it is interesting that, as you said, most districts don't focus on vocabulary and don't focus on, as you said before, fluency. I know Tim Brzezinski talks about that because it's not really built into any curriculum to do fluency, although there's like mountains of evidence that
Right,
fluency it's I'm like, it almost makes sense. So why don't you just say, instead of doing this computer program for 30 minutes, why don't you say, hey, we're gonna do repeated reading for 10
right,
and make it
right.
a non-negotiable? I think
Yeah.
the results would be through the roof. But anyway, um, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think like when you talked about like being like explicit and the programs, I think a lot of the programs, even novel study or that, it's like one-offs. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this word means this, and maybe the
Right.
kids use that word in a sentence once, and that's it. Like, oh my gosh, the kids like, maybe your most advanced learner, that's enough like exposures for those one or two kids, but the vast majority of kids need more exposures. So how to make sure that you're using that word in 6, 7, 8 different times through the course of a couple of weeks, so that word really sticks. And when it really sticks is when the kids are using it, or the kids are using it in their writing.
Hmm.
Then that word is in their long-term memory. But even like I like to teach vocabulary like explicitly, where I teach like a word and sort of its antonym. Like,
Hmm.
I because I don't think it takes much longer, and then you could have kids, differentiate between the words, like the words progression and regression. Okay. Words that have the same root, gress, which is kind of walk, like, but it's a little abstract. You're like, ooh, you're going forward or going backward. Um, but if you're going to teach progression, why don't you just teach regression as well? It's only going to take like a tenth of the time. And
Hmm.
then you can come up with sentences right away, like for examples, and the kids on their whiteboard for spelling practice, they're differentiating between those two words right away. So, and they're getting spelling work, and they're getting practice right away with those words. Um, and
But it's
and
like,
then go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, like, it's kind of like, I like you're talking about the word mapping and things like that, and like the research shows, if you mix whether you're talking about vocabulary, the phonics piece of spelling, or the code, all that together, the kids learn the words a lot better, and it actually is more effective for all three. But as you say, a lot of this stuff is more in isolation.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a big thing, and that's one of the projects I'm working on is
Mm.
trying at the upper elementary, giving kids more decoding work, more fluency work, but kind of and more spelling work, but kind of around vocabulary words. Because you don't want to teach kids like sort of babyish words when you're doing spelling. You might as well teach harder words and harder spelling patterns, and words that when you talk about like attention, they want to be motivated. They want to learn harder stuff. But everything's like isolated. It's in its own silos, and then teachers don't have enough time. So
Well,
like with fluency work, you might as well, if you teach some new words, create passages and embed those words in the passages so the kids have practice pronouncing those words and reading them in context. So they're learning the words better because you're providing more context, but they're actually reading. Now we can do it a little bit easier than years ago because we have AI where it can help speed the process up. Um,
mm,
so yeah, so like fluency work for me in fifth grade, my kids are reading out loud and doing repeated readings daily
mm.
in fifth grade.
Well, and the
Yeah.
thing is too, as you talk about operating in silos, and that's one of the biggest, like having a chance to present a couple times, not all I think one year I presented probably each type of conference, whether you're talking about multilingual, whether you're talking about science of reading, whether you're talking about actually how to reading, did one at reading recovery 2 years in a row, and which obviously is the complete one of the biggest balanced literacy conferences. And I was like, everybody is so this way, instead of everybody trying to figure out a way where we can kind of come together and come up with a unified approach to actually teach. And I think with teaching, I've always felt, and I think, people push plannings, and I've never been a big fan of plannings. I hate them. As far as like actual like POCs or people getting,
Hmm.
I think they're wasting time because I always tell people it's like a person trying to prove they're the smartest person in the room instead of everybody just kind of just getting together and actually figuring out what's best for the students. And I think it filters into the rest of education where everybody wants to say, So say like I know Nate Joseph was talking about how a lot of science of reading people got mad at him because he posted some he did his I guess a meta-analysis on I want to say OG method or something like that, and
Mhm.
he said it had a low effect size. I'm like, it isn't that as a bad approach. It's just it can't be the only approach. It's just doing one thing. So you can't say hey, the reading outcomes aren't gonna be good. Yeah, because you're just doing one part of it. Like so, yeah, they can decode the word, but can they comprehend it or are they fluent readers? So it's not that the system is bad. It's like, so why not just do OG for this amount of time and then put something else for this part? Like, so you want to say that you did this method and got high outcomes, but it sometimes it's illogical. So you can't say a comprehension approach works when you're in a classroom full of half of them are non-readers. How is that? You can't say the approach is
Right,
ineffective. They can't even access it yet. So it's kind of
right.
I think people are too much in silos instead of like, hey, let's get together and come up with a unified something that works for all kids. And okay, we need to have 10 minutes of fluency. We need to have 10 minutes of this instead of putting it on your veteran teacher. And we both are people who understand the science of reading the things that kids need. We can kind of go in and just do the stuff. But
Yeah.
the average teacher that's just starting or something like that, it's like here in Texas, they have the science of reading test. And I was looking at some of the stuff. I'm like, I get all of it, but like, I'm really into the stuff. I'm like, if you're a new teacher, there's no way you can get all this. So, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and sometimes it's technical. Like I remember I took a couple of science of reading quizzes, and I feel like I have a pretty good background. And I'm like,
Mm,
man, I got terrible scores on them. Like
mm,
terrible because it was like
mm,
so technical. It wasn't like
mm,
applicable to the classroom. But when you say like when you bring up about, I think like even with administration, like there's sometimes a divide. Like you add on and add on and add on, and no one ever says, well, we have this amount of time, right? Like it's like, okay, well, just add that on for 10 minutes. Okay, but what am I taking away? So we never talk about like, ooh, what do we like whenever we decide to teach something, whenever we decide to, even work with this specific kid for 2 minutes, we are actively deciding not to teach something or not to work with the other kids in our classroom. And no one wants to like have that hard discussion, like, ooh, then we have to take something away, you know?
Yeah, and like I don't know, because one of the things I want to say my next project, I really want to find a way to truly merge tier one and tier two instruction within the classroom, or what that looks like. Because you can prevent. Because I was an interventionist for a couple of years, and
Okay.
essentially more of a tier two interventionist, more I guess you call preventative instead of tier three. And I really see the disconnect. And I'm not saying classroom teachers don't know how to do small group instruction, but a lot of them don't. So it's kind of like, how do you merge the two? For one, you can eliminate allocate those resources and people toward other things if teachers are effectively doing tier one and tier because and I'm friends with some of the people that are big on tier one instruction, which is cool, but there's some kids still not gonna get it. So I'm like, how do you like make it where it's effective within the classroom? I think that's probably one of the things I'm gonna have to. And they say the book Good to Great, focus on what you're doing first. So that's one of the things I really want to try to
Yeah.
do is focus on that quality tier one and tier two instruction. But like you said, it's like, what are you gonna take away? And then they want to make a lot of people use this program or that program instead of just doing what best. It's like, hey, I want you to use this program to do your interventions. I'm like, but that's not going to work. So why are you telling us to do it? It's kind of like you know it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I kind of could close. I always like to close out with a little bit of whether it's advice or just kind of where you see yourself at. Where do you kind of see the next 5 years? I know you're not a spring chicken teacher, but now that you're kind of getting a little bit of notoriety and people are paying attention to you, where do you kind of see yourself in the next 5 years?
Um, I think, I mean, I like, I'll be in the classroom for the next 5 years. I like the daily grind of it.
Uh,
I think just, if people respect my work is to try to like with vocabulary, and I think morphology is going to be a big piece that I think it's just people have just started talking about morphology in like the last 3 or 4 years. I think morphology ties so much of the language and the spelling together, that I think teachers need to ramp up their knowledge in
mm,
that for sure. Because even spelling wise, when you talk about suffixes, in spelling, if kids learn the morphology, that, oh, that ly is a suffix, like real, really, that's why we're spelling it with two l's, because the real is the base and ly is a suffix. So I think for me personally, I'm going to be doing a lot more work in that realm, and trying to help teachers and scale up their knowledge.
is it a potential book maybe coming?
Yeah, people a couple like I don't know. Like here's the thing. where I grew up, my language, my wife always makes the joke when I have four older brothers, you could take the boy out of Lackawanna, you can't take the Lackawanna out of the boy. My language was never strong. I think in the last 10 years, my language has ramped up. And like I just remember like when I took the SAT and that I was great in math, my language suffered. So I think that's why I'm big with trying to impart more language with kids because I think it's so helpful if kids it opens up more doors for kids, like for sure. Um,
Mm.
so I think like for me now I got off track. Oh, but like so a couple people have mentioned on Twitter about like writing a book and like my writing skills like are not like some of these teachers who write books, their writing skills are amazing. So like I'm still hesitant because I don't think I have strong enough writing skills. I could probably get over that. I probably just have to do it. Um,
Well, he'll say you
you
have
know,
ChatGPT now, but
well, it does help a little, but I think teachers are looking for some more just like how it looks in the classroom because we have
Mm,
so many books on research and
mm,
what works in that. But I
mm,
think teachers want like, all right, how does this apply? I've been teaching for 3 years. What can I do tomorrow, like in the
mm.
classroom? So I think we
Yeah.
need to go. I think we need to go more there.
Yeah, I definitely hate when I tell people like I like some of these people and I've interviewed certain people, but I was like when people say you got to go through this training and it takes 2, 3 years to get it, I'm like, man, nobody has time for that. It's like the West Coast offense in football. You just don't deal with
Yeah.
it anymore. I don't know how much you are in the sports, but like certain
Well,
systems we just don't do anymore.
I live outside of Buffalo, so let's just say that. So
I'm sorry.
yeah. See, sports where I laugh like the word, they call us a passionate fan base for the Bills, and I'm like, where that root means? It means to suffer and endure. We've been suffering and enduring for the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's definitely when you go to four straight Super Bowls and lose all four of them. That's wow.
That was my high school years, freshman through senior.
I mean, that would have been like a gut punch every year, but I'm not going. I'm not. I know it's a trigger, so I'm not. No, but it is kind of like that though. Like in certain systems, I even like wrote a book called like Phenomenal Intervention, the playbook, and one of the things it's not a plug. I'm just saying here's my podcast, I guess. But at the same time, like I built it a lot around like systems in sports, and like something like the West Coast offense, and I had to suffer through that. I'm a Mississippi State fan, and we had this coach Sylvester Croom who was a Bear Bryant disciple and all this stuff like that and played for him. So he came in and wanted to run the West Coast in college. It's hard enough to run in the pros. Now I'm a 49er fan, so I saw this work for years, but they say it takes 3 years to really become proficient in it. Like no matter what you're doing, whether in sports, nothing people give you that long anymore at all. So with teaching, you got people who are leaving the profession within 3 years. We
Yeah,
can't wait 3 years for a kid to be proficient or be good. Oh, I need to go through this training for this many years for me to really get it. Like, man, we need something that where people can, like you said, jump in the classroom. I can do this today.
yeah,
Now, I don't like, I've learned to not make 800 million changes throughout a school year, but if this is a deficit someone has, well, this vocabulary, can I plug this into my block for 20 minutes and it works and it's effective? Like I think that's what people are looking
yeah,
for.
yeah,
And all this training, reading some 500 page book or something like it's like it's like what's best. So yeah, I get what you're saying with that. It's like we need to focus on more
yeah.
that teacher. Go ahead.
Just the little things like even like I'm a huge fan of mini whiteboards. So like I grew up, my attention in school was not good, and my mother just recently, my mother's 86. She brought over all my report cards, and I'm like, oh, I was not as good as I knew I wasn't great, but ooh, some of the teacher comments, and you know. I think I talked too much and then I didn't pay attention enough. But the mini whiteboards, I use those so much, and I'm like, because I wish like teachers used that with me because I it would have made me like write stuff down right away and not just sit and stare and try to listen because I would just tune out and I would like just kind of fall asleep. So even like mini whiteboards, like with vocab or anything, just asking kids questions and having them answer, because then you're getting 100% participation and you're seeing who knows what. You don't need technology for that. You just need a marker and a whiteboard.
It's quite simple. So I want to hold you too long. I just want to thank you one for joining me today. It's kind of fun. One another male teacher, that's always fun to be honest with you. It's not too many of us at the elementary
There's
level, so
not.
that's all. Yeah. So thank you for joining me for that. And again, just thank you for joining me. Thank you for doing the podcast, and I look forward to putting this out next week. I'm excited for people to kind of hear about this and talk a little bit more about vocabulary instruction. All right, y'all.
All
Thanks for
right.
listening. This has been Jeremiah Short. Thank you.